federal government, they created a mapping system. This mapping system, with the help of local realtors, developers, and brokers, was used as a grading system for every city in the United States. This grading system graded neighborhoods. The grading system was a basis of lending. It showed lending security in every neighborhood in America. With that being said, the grading system went from A to D, and I'm sure you know, well, you can guess that A was more secure, and D was a worse neighborhood to invest in by banks. These practices can still be traced back today, being that I think one of the neighborhoods that was the A neighborhood is Bayshore, which we all know Bayshore is 1%. And Ybor City being a D neighborhood that was graded. And if you ride through Ybor today or the last 10 years, it hasn't been the most invested in neighborhood. In Ybor City back then in the 1930s, half of it was, it also incorporated East Tampa. So we ride through East Tampa, I'm sure we all know what East Tampa is. So I'll pass this over to Kevin.
So I guess one of the things I wanted to touch on in regards to this topic was, I guess you could say, some of the land planning practices. I happened to spend some time, worked for the city at one point, and my degree is in urban design, urban planning, so definitely did a deep dive on, I guess you could say, how the land was zoned, as well as future land use. So, and future land use definitely has I guess you could say, a huge impact on what can actually be done. So for instance, if you look at a community like East Tampa, it's primarily R10, which means you can get 10 units per acre. Now, I guess the challenging part with that is a lot of homeowners in that area have pretty big lots, but like it's big enough for their home and possibly another smaller home, but because of the future land use, they're regulated to only have that single home. And then we all know, you know, the issue with ADUs and everything, so I think that's a citywide issue. And then you look at an area like South Tampa, and it's just the opportunity to develop is much greater. And then also if you look at the PDs that have been, I guess, approved in those two respective areas. Planned development. So it's like it's basically you present your project, and it's kind of like void of not all of the regulations, zoning and code regulations, but it's definitely a way to kind of have a little bit more freedom with your development. So if you go just a few blocks south of Kennedy, you drive through, you'll see quadplexes, you'll see a lot of quadplexes, like luxury quadplexes. Those, some of them are RMs, but some of them are also PDs. So then you go to a neighborhood like East Tampa, and the biggest blob, I guess you could say, of PD is a public housing project. So, it's just a disparity. Some of those disparities, and people want to, as we kind of get into this era of people being a lot more knowledgeable about development and just kind of capitalizing on their land, people in East Tampa, neighborhoods like East Tampa, are starting to realize I can't even do anything because of I had so many times people would call to try to get on the PD schedule, and they just were, I guess, discouraged by the fact that they couldn't really do anything. And on top of that, there's just not really, the identity of East Tampa is not really one that, I guess you could say, aligns with development. Like, it's not one versus somewhere like even North Hyde Park. Like, or where we're at right now. Like, it's literally, like, you got investors you got Asana out of Charlotte that's doing something, and I think we might have one of the biggest projects in East Tampa right now, converting a club to a pharmacy. So, but yeah, that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to speak on.
And I guess I wanted to talk a lot about framework and decision making and things like that, and being able to see as far as being able to plan, I guess, versus taking on things that make sense just for now. Because just briefly, I guess I'll just explain different paths. So if I were to take on going into public housing or something like that, and it makes sense today, and I'm not depleted of, my savings per se, compared to, somebody that did take on, a financing obligation in the form of a mortgage. You may be depleted of, your funds now, but it makes sense, 10 years later. But if I were to take on, going into public housing and funds may be plentiful, but you're at somebody's disposal 10 years later, that may be a bad decision. So it's just really being crippled economically, I think, as a people, and it stems from, making decisions or maybe staying too long in something that, wasn't made to live off of. It's just, made for getting on your feet and getting on. And like if you can't see past the first 30 days, the next 30 days, if you can't see past that, then how are you able to understand, a financing obligation, again, in the form of a mortgage that goes, through, I guess, 30 years? So, you don't have to worry about the next 30 days because it's taken care of. It really affects, the lens in which you see life through, and it makes it very tough to plan. So that's what I wanted to, speak on today. And we've been in real estate the last couple of years, 7 for me. I'm getting old, man.
You good?
Keep going.
I'll just summarize it. Sorry about that. In summary, what we wanted to talk about was, again, the inequitable planning. So it started off at a federal level where our neighborhoods were basically, the minority neighborhoods are basically deemed non-investable. The banks didn't want to provide loans for minority communities. And thus, that created a generational issue. The neighborhoods weren't being invested in back then. The neighborhoods aren't being invested in now. And now other people are coming in and investing in these communities because the properties are now deemed cheap and accessible. In regards to public housing, we all talked last night, and we all determined that a lot of the public housing communities that were mapped for the city of Tampa were in the D-graded neighborhoods, which should show you how much we were planned for. So we welcome all questions. Sorry.
And just to kind of follow up on Dante's comments about public housing being in those communities, I guess to the untrained eye, one could say, well, what's the issue with public housing? Well, from what our opinion, our perspective, I guess it's a good thing, but long term, the goal in America is for ownership and for wealth. Public housing doesn't encourage those things. It definitely, it's more of a Band-Aid. And again, as Ponce said, when you're fighting for scraps, you don't really have the discernment to be able to tell what's a Band-Aid and what's a lifesaver. So I think again, public housing is cool, but I think if we really want to, especially as Tampa, I think Tampa really we kind of tout this image of being one big family, which I think we are at our core. But as a lot of new money comes into the town, that definitely influences and changes things. So, yeah, I just think that if we want to be the best city that we can, I think it's important that we take care of, you know, the natives. Everybody's important, but the natives are. If you cut my wrist, a Cuban sandwich will come out. Right? So I just, and you can just tell if you're from here, born and raised, and you know, we greet everybody, you know, but if you're from here, born and raised, like when you talk to somebody that is also from here, born and raised, there's just a different type of connection. So, yeah, I just think just trying to make everything equitable for everybody would be in our best interest. But yeah, that's all I thought.
We're ready to open up to
Yeah.
questions. We already got our first.